President Trump signed the 2018 Farm Bill. So we now have an official legislation in place that will allow hemp farming for an industrial and medical use from a business and capital standpoint. And so, Eric, what do you think about the Farm Bill got signed today?
Yeah, I actually just put out a post on LinkedIn. Well, first and foremost, hey, everybody out there. I hope y'all have been having a powerful week. We're getting into the holidays, so I know a lot of people were either being lazy at work this week or y'all were, trying to finish it up and get everything done before you can get out to these shopping malls and stores for the holiday madness. So, I hope you guys are getting ready for the weekend. Christmas is coming up next week, so I hope you guys are excited for that and spending some time with family. That's what I enjoy the most about the holidays, is spending time with family. So, back to the Farm Bill, I put up on my LinkedIn yesterday, somebody like myself and probably you too, Roz, we follow, the news quite often. So, we kind of see everything that's going on. We read articles constantly. People are constantly contacting us and asking us for our opinion on different things and so on. Right. But yesterday, if you were following politics, man, what a whirlwind. Like, there was so much that was happening in Washington yesterday that, for most people, I think the Farm Bill just escaped everybody's attention. Unless you're somebody who is in the cannabis industry or in the hemp industry, you probably didn't even know that it happened. And I know a lot of people who are interested in this industry, you probably didn't even know it happened as well. So, again, I think it's an exciting time. A lot is happening in Washington, a lot of craziness, and sometimes it looks like our government can't get their act together. But the silver lining in all of that is that yesterday, President Trump signed into law the Farm Bill, which allows now, for CBD and hemp to be legalized here in the U.S. And by no measure is that a small deal. That's a very, very big deal for this country. It's a very big deal for, on so many different fronts, from farmers to potential jobs that can come out of it. And I know we're going to get into all of that today. So, you guys heard me last week. I get excited about this hemp stuff. And so we should be excited about what happened yesterday.
Absolutely. And we have a guest. We have two guests for us today. We have Miss Catherine. Catherine is out of Canada. She's someone who is a CBD hemp specialist, an educator, a farmer. She's going to talk about, from the Canadian perspective, who has been light years ahead of us, how did she get into the industry? And I just want to know, Catherine, as you tell us about your story, how did you end up going and taking acres of land that you own and you start your own hemp farm? So say hello to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Roz. I'm happy to be in Canada, but congratulations to you guys over there in America on your hemp farm bill. Congratulations.
We're fully legal.
Hi, Eric. It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you
nice
since
to see you as well. I can tell right now by that jacket that you guys are getting some pretty cold weather up there. I'm down here in sunny South Florida.
I'm jealous. But yeah, nice to see you. So I turned 50 this summer, and we had some land, 100 acres. And I thought, when I woke up close to turning 50, how am I going to make this life different? What can I do to improve this world? So I thought, okay, it costs $50 to get your hemp license. And I know that's the fact in the US as well. And why not grow some hemp, I thought. So it was quite easy. I've never farmed before. So I like to tell people how easy it is, because I'm not generally a farm girl. You see me with my fur coat on. But I love farming. I loved being around the plants. I loved watching them grow. And the good thing that you guys have going on in the States is you have a lot of land available that's free, that the government's actually giving away to farm. So you don't even have to own the property. You can actually get land for free. So there's a lot of opportunities in farming now. So I grew the 50 acres, and as it was growing, I didn't have a plan in place what to do with the hemp after either. I hadn't thought that hard. In front of it, I just put it in the ground. It grew nicely. We gave it a lot of love. We read books out in the hemp field this year. And so then we found a company that came, and they combined the hemp for us, and they've taken it to an extraction facility, and it's now actually being dried in the facility, and it'll be going through extraction in the next month or so. So I'll be happy to share that extraction and with you guys when it happens too, that they're actually making medicine from something that I've done. So that's very exciting. And 50 acres is a big, but you don't need 50 acres. You an acre, 2 acres, 10 acres. There will people who will benefit from growing hemp. And, you know, the relationships that are coming out of this are actually people are coming together. They're finding ways to work together. There's farming co-ops going on, and people are finally starting to realize, you know, how well this is actually going to change the world. So I'm happy to help and mentor, advise, anything I can offer to my fellow American friends, I'm there. So thanks for having me today, Roz.
Mute myself. The reason why I had Catherine on is because when she was telling me her story, one, I think it's courageous. I think it's bold. I think it's beautiful. I think she's passionate about cannabis and hemp in the industry itself. And what better way to say, listen, I'm going to take the $50 application. I'm going to jump on top of it. You know what? And she probably didn't understand exactly all the different process and what have you. But we're going to talk about that. And I want to talk about how'd you get your hemp seeds? How'd you find a partner to come and be able to help you harvest your hemp? First, I want to also introduce, and I think we have him on the line. He's not on video, but we got Steve Edmonds. Steve, can you hear me? Steve?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're a little low, but I can hear you.
Steve, can you hear Steve? No? Okay. So anyways, hopefully Steve will be able to come in. Steve Edmonds is a scientist. He's a researcher in hemp. He's someone that I've tapped into in regards to information and understanding about just the efficacy of the plant and how you can stretch the plant out. Let's just talk about some of the current status, or what the past status was and what the issues were. You know, the first thing about it was that the limited market in the U.S. prior to the Farm Bill, just up to the Farm Bill, there was $688 million worth of hemp imported in 2016. Lots of public education needed. There's some restrictive regulations. The biggest thing also with hemp, and this is something that you guys, if you get a chance to either go to Hemp Inc. and see a plant, there's no physical infrastructure. In order to process your hemp, in order to take it as an industrial product or biodiesel fuel or things of that nature, you gotta process it. So there's no physical plant, no equipment, no distribution, lots of billion-dollar investment. Where's that money going to come from? I mean, Eric, what do you think in regards to funding for the infrastructure? Where's that money going to come from, and how is it set up? And Catherine, how's the infrastructure set up in Canada? And I'll let you go first, Eric.
All right. Yeah, funding is obviously going to be something that I think everybody's going to have to consider. But I think with industrial hemp in particular, it's not like when you're growing medical marijuana or, the different strains that require a lot of attention and hands-on, really becoming a craft, a cannabis. With industrial hemp, it's grown primarily outdoors in a field where you're not being so hands-on with the plant and so on. And I think when you look at that, I think your overall cost per acre may not be as much as you think. And I think Catherine hit it on the head when she said, she chose to go with 50 acres. And there are going to be others who are going to try to start off with 100 acres, 200, 300 acres. But the reality of it is you'll probably end up, wasting your time and spending more money than you need to and not really having a well-run, a well-oiled machine, if you will. So I do encourage people, start small, start on an acre or two, 5 acres, 10 acres, small scale. And I think you'd be surprised at how little capital you may need in order to get that type of operation started. And then, and so that's one thing that I would say is, don't try to shoot for the moon. Take your time, start off with a small scale operation so that you can actually learn the process. You can learn what works for your area, what works for, your farm. Are you working with soil that actually needs, more fertilizer and so on, or more water? So, consider what works best for you in your area, your locality, but start small. And I think you'll end up spending less money. You'll have more success and, less of a headache when it's all said and done. And Catherine, what about you? Talk about some of that early cost, that you guys had to pull together. Did you find that to be a difficult thing to pull together the monetary resources, or,
No,
give us an idea of what we're talking about?
So it actually cost a few $1,000s for the seeds. And one thing I wanted to add in here that came to my mind was, so essentially, when I started, I didn't have any help. I didn't have anyone to turn to. So that's kind of the idea of building like cooperatives or alliances. And there is money available to start your business, especially if you're a minority in America. For farming, there is money available. And I'm going to make some of this information available to Roz so people can get this information through her. But there is money available. And keep in mind with hemp, you don't require the same security as you do with cannabis, right? So with cannabis, you have to have cameras every 50 feet. I know in Canada, our LLP rules are very tight. When I was talking to Wanda James, when I was in Albany, and Mary Pryor, they said that, the cost used to be $50 or $500,000 for the application for a cannabis dispensary or a license in the US. That cost now you're looking in the millions, okay, for cannabis, security measures, cameras, the staffing, the criminal record checks. There's a lot of reprisal land available in the United States too, for people who've been convicted of offenses. So what I'm focusing my time on is looking for people to grow hemp, but that reprisal land doesn't have to grow cannabis. It can grow hemp as well. So the costs are so little with hemp. And I tell people, use hemp if you're really hell-bent on growing cannabis. Use hemp as your stepping stone to make an income. The companies I'm working with in Canada and the United States, we're not looking at robbing people for their hemp. We're looking at creating strategic partnerships. So I think there's a certain trust that needs to be rebuilt with folks again. And I think building a trust in them knowing that people aren't interested in taking everything from them now. It actually has to be a 50-50 split. And we need to get growing hemp because our environment needs hemp. And there's also like research I'm doing where we're growing an acre of hemp on radiation sites where there's radiation, and the hemp's actually sucking the radiation out of the ground and making it viable again. So that hemp is no good, but it is good in a way because you can't use the hemp because it's full of radiation, but it has prepared the land for something else now where people can now live on radiation sites, or we can start to grow on radiation sites by growing a crop of hemp. So we have to let the government know how important hemp farming is. And I know there's federal funding available, and I know there's ways to find it. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of that information upcoming in the new year with Roz, so she can share it as well with everyone. There's money. Absolutely. And it's not expensive, and everyone can try it. Like I said, Erica was in agreement. It doesn't have to be 50 acres. Try an acre. Try 2 acres. If you have the farm, the cost isn't that expensive. I like the US because you guys actually give higher genetics than what the Canadian government in Canada. You guys are actually allowed between 18 and 22% in the US of genetics. So there's a better place to start. You guys have the hemp the Farm Act bill, the bill passed now. You have money and you have the genetics. So we got to get going on this.
That's right. That's right. So I want to bring in Steve Edmonds. Steve, brother, I'm so glad to see you. I know we had a little technical difficulty. You had to find a plug. I get it. But you guys, let me tell you something. This guy right here, we've been connected with one another for over 2 years now. We've sat at different meetings together. We've sat in Tallahassee together. We've sat on different panels together. And he, by far, is a hemp expert that I trust. And I want him just to share a little bit about his experience and about his background and what have you. And Steve, tell us in regards to the Farm Bill, what do you think what's the 1, 2, 3 action plan that people who want to get into farming, what should they be thinking about now since the Farm Bill is signed?
Well, I think, can you all hear me? First of all, let's make sure that I'm on. and thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it greatly. I think that the Farm Bill is key to opening up things here in Florida. And I want to remind everybody that just because the Farm Bill passed doesn't mean that we can go out and start growing hemp today or tomorrow. We still have a lot of work to do here in Tallahassee and with the state of Florida. However, the Farm Bill does specify that it will allow or federally remove the prohibition from states in enacting in their own hemp programs. And the Department of Agriculture and or the legislators of each state are going to be able to create what those programs look like.
Okay.
So it's my understanding, and I'm aware of over a half a dozen bills already being drafted and presented for sponsorship, dealing with hemp legislation in Tallahassee. And I spoke with Commissioner-elect Nikki Fried 2 days ago in regard to her vision for hemp, and I think that we're in a great situation coming. But I do believe that we're going to have a little bit of bureaucratic and governmental delay in the fact that both our legislature and our Commissioner of Agriculture have their eyes set on this new opportunity and this new commodity crop for the state of Florida.
Okay.
What happens politically is really what the next steps in Florida are going to be about. And do the legislators draft a bill that is something that is inclusive and allowing everybody to play on a open market field? Every pun intended there. Or do they try and put something out there that says that you have to be so large and have so many acres and have so much experience at particular farming and particular crop management, because they're going to try and continue reefer madness and call it an invasive crop.
Right.
We have the whole spectrum of political possibilities that can happen over the next 6 months. Now, for me personally, I'm a conservative guy that supported a blue candidate for Commissioner of Agriculture, and Nikki Fried. So I already put my political chips out there and who I'm going to be supporting, and that's going to be Nikki and her and her hopeful development of the hemp program and putting it under the Florida Department of Agriculture. I believe that there's going to be a lot of political wrangling in the state legislature, and I believe that Nikki's going to have a hard time without the community's support in being able to develop something that is going to be open to everybody. And what she told me is she'd like to see the commodity come in just like any other commodity crop in Florida, which would mean that you have different levels of regulation. You can grow it in your backyard because you bought it in Lowe's at a plant or two. But if you're going to grow and scale, you have different license requirements and different oversight that comes into play. And that happens whether you're growing tomatoes or oranges or blueberries or what have you. So she just basically wants to transfer the crop to be treated like any other crop in Florida, which to me seems to be the most reasonable course of action. What my concerns are politics as usual in the state of Florida, and special interests getting involved in and saying that, you know, they are more interested in keeping the market for themselves.
Right.
And that is that's where we have to coordinate as various different activists from different sectors in Florida to make sure that we do what they've asked for 15 years, which is, oh, well, we can't do anything because that wouldn't comply with federal guidelines. Well, now we need to make Florida comply with federal guidelines, and we will have an open and fair hemp market in the state of Florida, which is exactly what well, at least what I've been working on for
exactly.
Hey, Steve, let me ask you this question.
For a while.
You know, Steve, let me ask you this. You mentioned that you were, you know, a conservative, you know, in terms of your political, you know, leanings, if you will.
Right.
In Florida, you know, and I'm one of those rare people born and raised here in the state of Florida. We haven't had, you know, our state has been, you know, in terms of politics, we've been a red state. Yeah, I think UCF pack. Shout out to the Knights Nation, go Knights. You know, longest undefeated streak in the country right now, but you know, that's right. Another subject, another day. But you know, I'm born and raised here in Florida, and one of the things that, you know, I've always, you know, try to share with people when it comes to politics is that, you know, we are like 3 different states, you know, in terms of North Florida being different than Central and being different than South Florida. But from a political standpoint, we are from, you know, we are a conservative state for the most part. We've been a red state since the late 90s. But when we were fighting for medical marijuana in the legislature, we didn't have what I thought we would have had more support for a horizontal model, a more free market model with a Republican-led legislator, but we didn't get that.
That's why I started calling writers.
Right. I mean, it almost seemed like, you know, there was a retreat on behalf of, you know, Republicans and conservatives from free market principles. And I'm just curious, you know, you supported a Democratic candidate for agriculture, but what is it going to take to get the Republicans who are leading our Senate, our legislature? And again, I know we're focused right now, this part of the conversation, just on Florida, but this has implications for other states like Georgia, you know, other states that have been historically, you know, conservative. How do we get conservatives to really back free market approaches to this industry?
I think it's back to education in general. The reality is that when we were dealing with the medical fight, because we were there, and one of the reasons why I supported Nikki over Caldwell is because he was one of the people that threw in the ridiculous requirements right at the end and kind of tried to scuttle the whole situation with the 30 years and you know, the stricter requirements and higher bonds and everything else. I'm extremely critical of the Republicans in regard to this policy, and have been from the late 90s on publicly. And they do not adhere to their principles, their stated business principles when it comes to any part of cannabis. Now, when we direct the conversation into hemp, I think that conversation becomes much more manageable for them, because they've been brainwashed basically that cannabis is the devil's lettuce and evil and blah, 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 and all the horrible rhetoric that came from the 30s. The reality is that all of that argument goes away very simply with, look, you could smoke the whole field of it and you're not going to get high. We're talking about industrial hemp here. We're talking about jobs, economy, I say environment and opportunity, you know, and this is about putting businesses to work, and small businesses and mid-sized businesses, and creating the agricultural base that we've lost because of the decline in the citrus industry. I mean, we can be number one in the world overnight in hemp. The largest production of hemp, to my knowledge, and maybe some other people have different ideas on this, is about 840,000 acres, and that came from China. You know, we have over 2 million acres available today in the state of Florida.
Europe is up there numbers as well. And
So
Canada
maybe the latest
up
numbers have come, but we have 2 million acres ready right now. And that doesn't even include the 600,000 plus dead and dying acreage of citrus that we have on the books. You know, I mean, we have plenty of land to do it and to compete globally. And the fun part about it is that we get to turn at least 3 times a year, where unfortunately the folks up there in Canada, they're only going to get one turn on that. I'm sorry, Catherine, but you know, the reality is that we're in a huge advantage, and we're just really doing ourselves as a disservice as a state to not be in the industry already. We're behind. We're behind South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, and all of our Southeast region. We should be leading the Southeast region. And that's the message I'm going to be hammering starting January 6th in Tally. You know, it's game on now, in my opinion. You know, I've played nice for 20 years. They put me off with well, we've got to match federal regulations, and I'm going to make them eat those words. Absolutely. Yep, we've got to match federal regulations. Let's do it.
So, Steve, let's pause right there, because one thing I want to make sure everyone understands is that he's talking about public policy, guys. He's talking about you have to go and make yourself present in your state capital. Start with your Department of Agriculture. So Nikki Free, for those who are not in Florida, she ran for agricultural commissioner here in Florida. She won. So that was his first go-to understand what's your philosophy on hemp farming in your state. Let them know who your name, connect with them. Connect with M4MM in this state. And if you want to be a part of the movement that we're doing, you don't have to be by yourself, because we have 24 state chapters, and our state chapter presidents are being given direction to go and make sure that we are part of the hemp conversation. We cannot, as communities of color, Black farmers, minority-owned business enterprises, not be a part of the conversation. We have to push the door. Steve is not going to let up, and he knows that there's so many different ways that this plant can be a benefit, not only for the state, but for the industrial purposes, and we can't let up. And so, so Catherine, from your perspective and what you're doing in Canada, is when you finally got your seeds and you got everything in, how, what was your step to find a partner that could help you turn your crop into some type of byproduct that you can use for medicine or for industrial purposes or what have you?
All be licensed, right? So you can't just sell your hemp to anyone. Obviously, the government's involved. They want to know what's going on. It wasn't difficult to find a partner. Actually, the people that I'm working with now that came to pick up my hemp, we've created the Hemp Alliance. We started a formation here of somewhat, and Roz, I obviously want to expand more on our conversation for the bundles of parcels of land that I'm receiving. So once I was farming the land and I started putting pictures up on social media, people started contacting me. So the good thing that came out of this was the guys who came and picked up my hemp, I actually now work for them in a way, because we've created a hemp alliance and we're going to show farmers how to hemp. We've created some cooperative farming stuff, some farming websites that we're working on right now. So I also have created a not-for-profit for hemp education. So we have a lot of partners that are, so I mean, I guess it's really just talking to each other, and like how Steve said, talking to people that are in charge, making decisions. That's where you have to start. You have to let them know that there's people that are willing to do this. There's people that are willing to help. Everywhere I go, I tell people, I'll mentor anyone. Anyone can contact me. I'll help out in any way I can. It's education, making the knowledge available to people, making them understand that this is a way that we need to get going, and we need to revert back to plant-based medicine, not only just for medicine purposes, but we need to make our buildings, our fuel, everything needs to be made out of hemp. We have to take all the process that everyone's put into the world and get back to some of the natural basics to save our kids and our planet moving forward. Yeah. We can't keep going like this. We can't.
I think
we cannot.
That's a good segue into something I think Steve is pretty he loves to get into in terms of the research. Steve, you and I don't think we've had a direct conversation, but through Roz, I'm very familiar with, the types of things that you get interested in. And when we think about what hemp can do in regards to remediation of soils, when we think about what it can do in terms of just other environmental implications and so on, I think that again offers us exciting times. We have some very serious challenges across this country when it comes to, everything from, runoff from our farms and so on, to water out in Flint, Michigan, and we have issues that need to be dealt with. And I think going back to what you were saying earlier, Steve, we can do something about that, and hemp can be our way forward with that. So talk a little bit about some of your research, Steve, in terms of and what are some of the implications. What can we do with this plant beyond the CBD? I was at a conference, and I'll say this and I'll shut up. I was at a conference in Boston, and I attended a symposium on hemp. And one of the guys spoke, and he said, CBD makes up about 2% of what we can do with an industrial hemp, but it takes up about 98% of the conversation. Yep. And so talk about, I know the CBD side of things is going to do well. I have all confidence that this industry is going to do what it needs to do in that regard. But talk about some of the other things that we can do with this plan and what we need to do in order to get ourselves ready for those things.
Well, I mean, I think that, you hit it right on the head with the displaced ratios there. And, the reality is that there's 50,000 different products that can be made from hemp, not including any of the medical stuff. That does include some of the food products and all that. But I mean, this plant can be used for food, for clothing, for fuel, a lot of the things that Catherine was saying. The thing that excites me the most about it is the bioremediation side of things. As she mentioned, they're cleaning up nuclear sites and radioactive sites and so forth. They've been doing that in Chernobyl since the meltdown, and they've done it in various locations across the world. One of the things that I'm really excited about is not only bioremediation, but water remediation, phytoremediation of water. That's what Hemp for Water is all about. Hemp for Water is got two sides. The first side of it is an economic plan, and imagine, we just opened up industrial hemp in the state of Florida. Do we want all that tax revenue to be into the pie fight of the normal legislature, or what happened if we were to allocate that tax revenue to water infrastructure improvements? There's $60 billion worth of water infrastructure. We have a water
issue here in Florida already anyway.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah, we have over $60 billion worth of known infrastructure improvement projects on the books right now. The feds don't want to pay for it. The state says we don't have the money to pay for it. Well, my research says that the first year of hemp, if it's able to get, basically 2 million acres into the ground, you're looking at an industry that is well in excess of $9 billion. If you were to exempt the industrial hemp players from corporate taxes and state sales taxes, that gives them a 10.5% break. Well, turn around and charge them 10%. Leave them 0.5% break for pioneering new industries, but allocate 10% to water infrastructure improvements. That's $900 million year one to start paying some of these bills off. That's a similar thing to what Colorado did with their education stuff and taxing for schools and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of allocating the revenue and the resources to the right places. Now, the other side of Hemp for Water is the research side. I unfortunately didn't get the Florida A&M project because I don't have the deep pockets that a lot of people have, or the funding that this project would have taken. But
we didn't get it either. So,
but the reality is that project's really important because it's going to quantify how much the plants can actually sequester from the water column. In other words, I know the plants are going to love the phosphorus and the nitrogen and the metals that are in the water columns polluting our waterways right now. The question is how much will they love it? How much will they uptake? And what kind of quantities do we have to put out in the rivers and lakes to clean the water? Is it a viable option or not? You know, I think my hypothesis is that it will be a viable option, that it will sequester a great deal of those nutrients. And I think that we end up with natural floating filters all over our waterways that keep our waters clean.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the project down in Brevard County where they're doing oyster.
Yes.
They use oysters to help clean up the lagoon there. And,
Yes.
you know, I think water restoration is certainly one of the areas that we can look at. I can tell you, I mentioned that to Nikki as well. You know, my background, I used to work for an environmental engineering firm, and we worked on, you know, these type of environmental conservation projects and so on. And I think at the very least, we certainly need to be doing some research to see what can be done with it. You know, our zoo and so on with their oyster program is a real program that, I mean, they have people who have waterfront properties. Literally, they're giving them the oysters to grow in their backyard. And a part of it is that you have to document, and, you know, they give them a software package to take notes on the progress and so on. And all of that is collecting data and allowing them to learn more about, you know, if we're going to use oysters to clean up the water, how many oysters are needed? You know, what's that necessary minimum, if you will? And
Right.
Where are the best locations? You know, what other benefits do we get from it when we do it? And I think you're absolutely, I mean, I think you're spot on in terms of the necessary research. And I think FAMU and UF both, you know, they have a very strategic place in our state. And I hope that they do more. And I hope that other states, you know, around the country are looking at that as well. You know, Catherine, Roz, it looks like you have a question. I don't know. I was going to ask Catherine about some of the.
My question was going to be for Steve. Do you think the whole pilot research projects are now still necessary, even though we have a farm bill that lets us legalize? Because in my opinion, let me do my own research. I don't have to go to FAMU now. I don't have to go to University of Florida. I don't have to go to Georgia State or whatever. Let me do my own, right?
I'm in complete agreement, and I'm actually changing the model from and somebody told me it was because I was too conservative on my numbers in the first place. Because I came in under $1 million, it was too small of a package. So I'm going to change. I'm going to change my model to a commercial model, because you know, basically what I want to do with those plants, since we're not cleaning radioactivity, we can use the byproduct of those plants for a lot of different things, you know, building materials and bedding and a whole host of opportunities for getting product that can be very saleable and very lucrative in terms of producing a profit. You know, I mean, if you can grow hemp plants, you know, you can make hempcrete a viable building source at that point. You know,
Steve, I would encourage you still, in some regard, to partner with a university, and here's why I say that. You know, when I think about what we need in order to continue changing our laws, the more published, peer-reviewed research that we can come in and walk into the door with, you know, I think the better our chances of getting, you know, overall a program that looks like us, you know, or looks like what we want it to look like. Catherine, I was going to ask you guys, you guys took a very different approach up there in Canada in regards to, you know, just opening up the market and so on. What are you seeing in terms of research? Is there an interest in research in Canada? Are there research projects that are going on that we should, you know about? What is your, you know, what are you seeing up there in Canada? Unmute yourself.
Research, right? We definitely have $65 million in each research category available for funding right now in Canada. That's up for grabs. So we can see that, you know, my primary focus is with some of the projects I'm working on through education. I'm collecting a lot of data mining through my education platforms as well. But there is a lot of research dollars available, and if it's 65 million in each category in Canada, as soon as cannabis becomes federally legal, and you'll start to see some research money coming available with the new Farm Act that's passed, because the CBD, we know already, is reducing overdoses by 37% in the US. So we need to scream up and down as loud as we can to the government, look, we need your population to be on CBD. Hemp derived is essentially, obviously, the best choice right now. And we need to get like this opiate reduction, the nationwide problem solved. I just wanted to show you guys that this is some cream, pain and burn cream that I made from some of my hemp this year. So I just dropped it off to some burn victims because it's actually healing them. So I just dropped off a case right now to the burn unit, and they're actually using it on some patients. So this is what hemp does. This is what hemp does. It's the betterment of humanity is what hemp and cannabis does. So, and that's what I tell people.
I love your packaging, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
The packaging looks nice. Talk about what it took to, get from a seed in the ground, to the processing to actually making products. Because when we talked about last week, I think making products and what we can do with the raw materials from hemp is where it offers us the greatest opportunity to create jobs in this country. Get back into manufacturing and so on. So talk a little bit about. I know you're doing it small scale, but talk about that.
Yeah, so from going into the seed, watching the plants grow and then drying hemp and putting it through an extraction process. But I'm working on an organic hemp extraction project now to eliminate the need for any butane or CO2 to heat up the hemp. I want to do an organic, natural farm to table. So I'm actually designing a machine for that right now, where it'll be a mobile machine that pulls up to the farm. And that's what I'm going to be doing in the US with you guys too, is it's going to be a farm to table.
All right, so stop right there. So stop right there. So that's critical, because I want you guys to understand, she's farming, she's cultivating. She has a process after she cultivates to be able to dry out her product, and then from there, from a drying perspective, to extract. So instead of trying to find someone with an extraction machine and trying to partner there, the opportunity of having processing it and being able to then break it down where you then can isolate it, and that's where you're going to have support, and you're going to have some folks that know what they're doing on that side, and that's where your partners come in. But then being able to understand packaging, and then understanding what delivery system that you want to have the medicine in is real critical. And I know, Steve, I see you shaking your head. Catherine, Steve, jump in. Because it's critical to talk about how you could be a small person and be able to come up with a product line that's ready to go, that can be viable and purchasable.
Well, I feel too, like, I know I'm one person, but I know with my hemp drive CBD products, I give more medicine away than I do charge, which is fine because it comes back to me in abundance of other ways. But what I do know is everyone who's tried hemp drive, and I think you have to have a personal experience with plant-based medicine, whether it's a family member that tries it, or whether once you have that personal experience and you learn that there's different options, right? And one person, like me, I've directly affected 500 and something lives with my medicine. So if we had a room full of people that each of us touched 550 people, and then they start, so it's education too, right? We have to tell 5 people to tell 5 people to tell 5 people. For me, getting the product is creating strategic partnerships with people who will come, pull up to the farm, take the medicine or the hemp, either extract it on site or ship it to a place where I'm setting up strategic extraction places throughout the whole United States, so biomass can be shipped there. And it's really about just like what you're doing too, Roz, like sharing the message, putting in a bunch of people together and spreading the message. It's hard work to make the product. But if I can do it, like I tell people, if I can do it, I have 8 kids. If I can do it.
That helps. So what she's talking about is infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
And that's what we really need. And you know, I know that medicine's your gig, Kathleen, but we've got 50,000 other products out there that can be made as well. And one of New Zealand's experiences was that they had an amazing first run out of the gate with growing their crops, and all these farmers got in and grew incredible crops, beautiful crops right out of the gate. And then they all died and rotted on the side of the field because there was nowhere to process it. That's right. So what we really need to be educating folks about, because education is key, is the other opportunities besides farming that's available. The guy that comes up to the door and says, "Hey, I'm here to extract," you know, that's part of infrastructure.
Yes.
The biomass collection and shipment to biomass processors is part of infrastructure. Seed drying and seed pressing is part of infrastructure. You know, those raw manufacturing in between fine manufacturing and raw and growing is really the missing piece that we're seeing all throughout, not just
across the globe,
the country, the globe too. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
you know,
China and Europe have established, you know, they have large scale facilities and so on. But when you get to the Western Hemisphere, that almost disappears. And you know, Steve, talk about you know, and from my research, my understanding, part of the reason what has taken that part so long to catch up is that right now CBD is king, and that, you know, CBD commands such a high price that the investment needed in laying, you know, preparing the infrastructure for, say, if we wanted to make biofuels, you know, and creating a processing, you know how you know what is it going to take, you know, in terms of getting us to a place to where, you know, again, I love the CBD side of it, but I know that at some point we do have to move into a greater capacity. And so what do you think is going to take for us to get to that? And, you know, how do we get investors to look at the long-term play versus right now some of the short-term gains that we can make with CBD and so on?
Right. So it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing, right? One of the things that really got me interested in what hemp could do energy wise was working about 10 years ago with a lot of the former players in Florida in developing energy crops that could be pressed for oil and then turned into biodiesel. And I was part of one of the first groups that actually did press a bit of hemp seeds into biodiesel and got it certified. You know, I actually got published in Biodiesel magazine.
Wow.
With that. So,
yay!
But it was just a science experiment basically. And Roz, you said before that I'm a scientist. I need to clear that up. I'm a political scientist. I just happen to dabble in real science. So
I'm right there with you, brother.
I wanted to make sure that wasn't misunderstood. So
you're my scientist, because when I when I don't know what the heck I'm talking about, I go, let me go to Steve and ask him.
So what we can do is in terms of investment, if we have the policy in place that is pro farming. In other words, first of all, the farmers in Florida aren't going to grow anything. I don't care if it's hemp or rosemary beads or some other mythical object. They're not going to grow anything until they have the confidence that there's going to be buyers for their crop. Yes. And they won't put seed one in the ground until they know that there's buyers for their crop. So that's where we need the investment is to make sure that the farmers have the confidence to grow the crop first. The second step is to show other investment dollars, look, this many acres are going to come out of the ground. We can feed a processing plant that requires 50,000 acres. You mentioned fuel, Eric. I wouldn't do a fuel plant with anything less than 3,000 acres. And that's only going to produce about 3.2 million gallons of fuel a year, a very, very small production facility in terms of volume. You know, in order to feed the fleet, you know, the Navy fleet, instead of using their diesel, petrodiesel to supply it with hemp-based diesel, you would need 50 to 100,000 acres in production full time. But you could absolutely do it with that amount of acreage dedicated to that particular product. And that's going to be some of how this happens, I think, is that large contractors are going to see the opportunity for using a lighter weight material and a better material in hempcrete, and they're going to make the commitment to say, okay, if you can give me this much hempcrete, then we'll make the buy. So they make the commitment to make the buy. All right, now I've got the commitment to make the buy. Now I got to go to the farmer and say, all right, I need 3,000 acres worth of acreage that's going to be dedicated to me, because then I'm going to take and process it into hempcrete to fulfill this order.
Yeah. Let me ask you a quick question. So let me ask you a quick question, and this is a good kind of segue. So when you talk about the planting methods and growing, can you talk about the fiber, like the male plants versus the female plants, and what works? And I mean, from a growing perspective, 3,000 acres, how much maintenance goes into it? What does that might possibly yield? People ask that question. And
how many workers are needed?
Right. Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on what you're growing it for and how you're doing it. I mean, one of the things that I would look to do personally is grow a crop that's going to have multi-functions and multi-profit streams. So I would be looking at growing both male and female crops, so I can produce viable seed, so that the seed could go to a number of different locations for a number of different products. And then once you're done harvesting the seed, you obviously have a lot of plant and stock material left over, and that could go to a whole bunch of different places. I wouldn't really recommend anything grown outdoors in the state of Florida for CBD, to be honest with you. CBD is really not the play in Florida. Industrial, for everything else but CBD, is the play in Florida. And I know that upsets a lot of my really good friends, but it's the reality.
But tell us why, Steve. Tell us why you think that.
Well, because CBD is a particular crop, and it takes a lot of maintenance. And if you're growing outdoors, the last thing that you want your very particular value ratioed crop to have is some cross pollination.
Right.
And in the state of Florida, it's going to be really easy to cross pollinate. If I'm growing for hempcrete or for petting material or for industrial oil, for that matter,
it doesn't matter.
The only thing I'm really worried about is if my plants get cross pollinated with actual cannabis and it goes hot. Right. And that's a whole different problem to discuss, is what we do with hot plants. But true industrial hemp can be grown outdoors without really a real concern about cross-pollination. But as soon as you start growing particular strains for particular ratios, now you're going to have some difficulty. And not to mention that the drought to rain season in Florida is a bit drastic. And we don't see it year to year, but we'll see it from every 5-year period. And that's going to cause some other hiccups in very particularly grown crops.
So a hemp-driven CBD crop is best done inside a greenhouse?
I would recommend it that way. That way you you have much more control over the natural elements, and we still have plenty of land and open greenhouses for that. I mean, my Lord, we have tens of thousands of acreages under greenhouse that are vacant right now. So there's plenty of places that can be done.
Yeah, and I think with CBD as well is that you have to consider that most people not most people, everybody who's growing industrial hemp for CBD, they're using it. Their end product is a human consumption product, right? And so that means that CBD does need to be grown with the same standards and protocols in place as your high THC strains and cultivars as well.
Well, so, maybe as food, with the same precautions as food. I don't know if you need to go as the same precautions as medicine.
Well, here's what I've found in the research, and here's why I think some people are putting some of those same protocols towards it. I agree. You can yield high quality CBD without having some of those protocols in place. But I think I've talked to a few processors, and one of the things that they see is, as you're going through the process of refining the CBD to get the oils and so on, you have you lose some of your potency, if you will. Mm-hmm. So if you bring a product that says say you have 10% CBD in it, after they've done what they need to do to extract it and so on, you may have a product now, maybe 5%, 7%.
Right.
And that may not command the same dollar amount that you once thought it would. And so, people who are growing it for, high quality CBD for the medicine side, if you're looking at, say, hemp hearts and some of these other things, perhaps that's not as much of a concern. But if you're, from what I've understood, this, very specific CBD, if you want to, have a end product that is still very high in CBD, that's still very high quality, it does take some more control measures to be in place to be able to, and then on top of that, have that consistency from one yield to the next yield and so on. So, but when we're talking again, like you said, with all of the other industrial things that we can do with it, and growing 2,000 acres and so on, even if you wanted to put those control measures in place, I mean, the type of money you would need to come up with to do that would just be, a non-starter.
Mm-hmm. So Steve and Catherine, we're getting around to the close of where we have to wrap up. This always happens that when we get halfway in, the conversation gets good. It's such information. So I definitely wanted you two to come back, because I think we need to have a conversation about the economics of hemp and understanding the different categories and understanding what, and then also the ancillary support that businesses that will go along with it. I want to ask you a question, Steve, and then Catherine, give us your final word. What do you think about, we have countries like in the Caribbean, Western Eastern Caribbean, we have the continent of Africa. We just heard about some other countries coming on board with hemp. What do you see a future there? I mean, from an economic development standpoint, because as you know, these are countries of African descent, a lot of them, and we have a vested interest at M4MM to understand how can we help them and build policy and help them understand infrastructure and what to do with that hemp over there. So if they're doing that, any recommendations you can think of?
For me, I'm in Barbados right now, in Trinidad, and St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Africa. So we can expand more on what those conversations look like. We've just secured 115,000 hectares in Africa right now for hemp, which will open up the EU market, right? So exactly why we're there. But I have my own land in the Caribbean that I'm actually going to go down and start to look at planting. I think the Caribbean has to be a focus to keep the money in those Caribbean countries, right? So we know that with Barbados, their government plans look like they're all about it, but a lot of money leaves Barbados. It doesn't stay in the country. So we have to build that country up. And hemp farming and cannabis farming is a way to keep the money in those Caribbean countries. So that's my thoughts on that. I can expand on that anytime you want to do anything on that, Roz, but I'm already in those countries. I'm already showing people, educating people, and we're getting this going in those countries because they have the perfect climate seasons and lands for growing, right?
Yep. So we have to partner. So Steve, Catherine, hold that thought. Steve.
I agree with. I mean, when you're looking at trying to, I think that the first answer to any country that's facing an economic challenge, whether it's a redeveloping Caribbean nation or it's a redeveloping American nation, they need to be focusing on the foundations. Agrarian economy is what built this country and what builds most countries. That's part of the whole civilization development is finding the cash crops that will produce the resources to grow the economy and grow the society. Yes. So as far as is hemp that cash crop, I think for the Caribbean and for anybody that's situated from equator to subtropic is a fool for not doing hemp.
Right, of course.
They have every opportunity that they can, and if they can produce their crops at 3 times the rate that everybody else can, well, then that's their cash crop, their economic advantage, their ability to be able to compete against the economies of scale. You know, one of the things that Canada had to do was get ahead of the curve and open up huge amounts of land to it, because they only get one shot at it a year. And when the United States opens up the Southeast, that's going to be turning three to four times a year in some of their crops, that's going to change their advantage in the marketplace substantially. Right. You know, and their expansion into other opportunities is a wise move. Diversification is a wise move, because
diversification is always a wise move, right, Steve?
That's right. That's right.
So I gotta put a pause on you. I gotta put a pause. We have hit the 2 o'clock hour. Promise me, Catherine, you coming back to see me again? Yes.
Awesome.
Every week, Roz. Awesome. We got to do it every week.
Steve, you coming back again?
It died.
Yes, Steve.
Everything died.
No, I think we lost Steve, but I think I'm confident we can get him back on at some point.
I'm thankful as well. You know what, guys? Thank you so much for joining us today. Eric, take us home.
Hey, listen, again, this has been an awesome time. I'm humbled every week to be on with great panelists and guests. Thank you guys for being on here and sharing your insight and your information with all of our listeners all across the country, all across the globe. We are in this thing to make sure that communities who have been historically left out of this conversation, that we are a part of this conversation.
You need to be.
Indeed.
I hope you have a powerful week. I hope that you spend this time going into the holiday season. Be safe out there in those stores and in the streets. Love on your family and get ready for 2019. It's going to be a powerful year for all of us. I'm speaking that into existence for me, for you, and for everybody else. So thank you guys. Until next week, we will see you all. Stay tuned.
Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, guys.